My name's Tom Seawood. I operate Sasquatch Island on social media, the website sasquatchisland.com, Facebook Sasquatch Island, and TicTok. But come with me on a journey as I bring you into my cabins located on the central eastern side of Vancouver Island, about half an hour drive off the main highway, down a logging road to the saltwater. And this is where I've had numerous encounters with Sasquatch. This here is what we call the Hill of Health, because when we found the location by land back in 2005, we had pretty good hangovers that morning, and we had to go down this big crack in the rock down to the saltwater. And walking back up, we were huffing and puffing, sweating, heads throbbing, and that's when we coined the term the Hill of Health. But it brings you to here. Great place for putting cabins with native killer whale designs on them, because we did paddle with the orcas here. That was the whole reason for putting these 5 cabins. They're rustic, they're not insulated, but they're made for the summer season. This is what we call the honeymoon cabin, because it's sort of off to the edge of the camp. A beautiful view, lights of cruise ships at night light this whole bay up, and of course you hear the blows of orcas as they go by, known as magenok in my language. But the sea kayak company I had with a tour boat, we used to bring people out so that they could have a close encounter with the orcas and humpback whales, sea eagles. My boat was called Glalis, which means finning killer whale, and we painted a native killer whale design on the boat and along the sides. I used to dress up like traditional attire of a tunic, and we were given the indigenous cultural experience to the wildlife of coastal British Columbia. And that's why now we're using the camp for Sasquatch expeditions, so that you can come out and enjoy. Through the years, we've had a lot of activity here with Sasquatches. April of 2005, on the far side of the beach, there's this orange granite that's broken down into gravels. And my 2 workers found a footprint about that big in that orange gravel. And they said, "Oh, it must have been a hippie kayaker here." And I said, "No, there's no kayakers out on the water in April, and it's up in this area. Especially here, because very few kayakers come here, other than the ones I was going to be bringing in here." And I said, "That's no paddler or human. That's a Sasquatch print. Look how big it is." In 2005, I moved these cabins from up on my Indian reserve about 30 miles away by boat, and I brought them here and rebuilt them. And in May of, 2005, I drove in with a pickup truck, because there's a logging road just behind my camp here. And I was working on the porch for what we call the kitchen cabin, and just building it, banging with a hammer, cutting with a saw. And my dog Land Claims, the golden lab cross bush dog, he was lying on the gravel at the head of the beach having a snooze in the sun. But down here on the beach, at about this stage of the tide, my son was down here, and at that time he was 5 years old, and he was plucking limpets, what we call China hats, off the rocks, playing with them. He was rolling boulders over and playing with the small crabs. And all of a sudden my dog Land Claims stood up and growled, and his hackles were up, his tail was all fluffed. And I said, "Go to Hunter." And he started to walk down the beach from the cookhouse cabin around the corner. And I followed the dog with my 30-30 beside me. And as I was walking down, the dog kept looking up on that bank, which was more open. You could see the rock bluffs and so forth. And he'd turn and look at Hunter, he'd walk down growling, and he'd look up to the left. Being a bush dog, he's trained not to run after everything unless I tell him. Well, as I got further down the beach, I noticed behind a tree sticking out was a shoulder that looked human, but it was covered in long brown cinnamon colored hair, and the shoulder was about that wide. It was big, and I knew right away what my dog was growling at. He must have picked up its scent, I guess. So I picked up my pace and I walked a little further to my son, and when I got to him at the water's edge, I looked up and I could see that thing looking at me. And I said, "Yo, Wixas, hello, how you doing?" Chunakwa, which means Sasquatch in my language, the Kwakwala from the Kwakwakiwak people. And that thing just looked at me eyeball to eyeball, and it just grimaced, growled, turned, and just boom, 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 walked up that hill and disappeared. And that Sasquatch was probably about 7 feet tall, I guess, and the shoulders were really, really wide. And I'd grabbed my boy and I said, "You better come up to the cabins now, I'll give you something to eat." We went up, and right away I wanted to take off, but I thought I'd stick around because I knew that Sasquatch was up the hill, the same trail area where I had to walk out with my boy and my dog. And fortunately I had my 30-30. Well, I waited about an hour or two, and then I left and never saw or heard anything, never smelled anything. And that was my first encounter in this, what we call the Sasquatch investigation camp now, which was my sea kayak camp. In 2006, we got chased out by 2 or more. I had scheduled a couple of kayak trips, and all the driftwood from the high tides had covered this gravel beach that I'm standing on. So I brought my 2 workers in here, one of them my sea kayak guide, and my sister came along with us, 10 years younger. And I started my chainsaw up and I began to cut all the driftwood. 2 full tanks of gas probably took me, I guess, close to 45 minutes to an hour. And when I was finished, I was all sweaty, and I put the chainsaw down and I called to one of my workers that was just entering the cookhouse there to throw me a beverage, a pop. I grabbed it, I took a big drink, and I sat down in a folding chair. And just when I sat down, there was 2 trees up on that bank that just started to shake violently, like you see the scary movies when a demon or a ghost shakes. That's what it was doing. And I looked at my dog, Land Claims, and I said, "Landy, get up there and see what it is." And he ran up the rock wall, and when he looked behind the 2 shaking trees, he just pushed himself off the rock wall and in the air did a 180, hit the ground, and he was a blonde streak running across all the driftwood because it was now high tide. And he jumped into the dinghy that we had sitting on some of the logs. I told my worker, "What is that?" And we're listening and looking, and all of a sudden this big boulder rolled down the bank right towards the cookhouse, and it's still in the bush there. It used to be more open, and I looked behind the cookhouse to my right, and there was this big, from here up, of a hair-covered, looked like a human. The eyes were kind of yellowish and with brown pupils, and I noticed right away the distance between the bottom of the nose and the top of the lip was very pronounced, and that thing just grimaced at me, and I could see its tendons and wrinkles. And I told the worker, "Where's my gun? Get my gun." And he said, "It's in the boat." And I had my tour boat at anchor on a mooring buoy right in the middle of the bay, a line going from the starboard to the beach and from the port to the beach, and a stern line, so the bow was facing the waves because there's a big westerly wind blowing. And I said, "Well, get me something, an axe, a machete." And he's running around in the cookhouse, and that's when I figured I better get him out of here. So I said, "You and Hugo get in the other dinghy." And my sister, I told her, "Get in the skiff." And she was running across the driftwood, which was floating, and she almost looked like Jesus trying to walk across water. And I had to yell at her, "Slow down, you're going to break your leg." And she got into the punt. I saw my 2 workers get into their skiff, and that's when I walked into the water above my knees and got into the punt with my sister and dog. And my sister began to pull that stern line really fast and almost flipped over our skiff. And I'm like, slow down, you're going to flip us." When we got to the boat, we were about 6 feet from the swim grid, and my bush dog, supposed to be brave, jumped and landed half on the swim grid, half in the water, kicking and scratching. He climbs up and he runs into the 12-passenger tour boat, and we tied up, got on board. I went straight to the front of my boat, and I grabbed my .338 in the case and opened it up and walked on deck, and we could hear them up on the bank yelling and making a roaring noise. And my kayak guide was so panicked, he was from Holland, that he was almost crying, and I had to tell him to slow down, you're gonna fall overboard. Cut the lines in the anchor line. Once all the lines were cut, I said, is it clear for me to kick ahead? And they said yes, and I left the bay and I went around the corner and I told my sister and everyone, oh, we'll just stay here and tie beside the big breakwater ship that would, keep the waves from hitting us. And my sister, crying away, she would have no part of that. I'd come here by myself or with other people, and we'd hear whoops and hollers and chirps behind the cabins at night. And it's just in the last 5 or 6 years that the interest in Sasquatch Bigfoot, I decided to do Sasquatch expeditions. And now we call it the Sasquatch Investigation Camp. And we bring people here that want to come out with us, and they pay a small fee, like going grizzly bear tours or whale watching. We bring them here, we cater to them, cooking for them, we bring them up the logging road, and at nighttime we sit here with our FLIRs and our listening devices, set up our trail cameras. But you hear that? Deafening roar of silence. How many times I've been down here by myself and I've just been in that cabin over there and I've stuck my fingers in my ears and went la 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 la, I don't hear that, I don't hear that, go to sleep. Because up there on the hill there, where the road is, where you park your vehicle, you'd hear the whoops and the chatters. Sometimes you'd hear the screams. Back of your hair would just stand up in the back of your neck. And you'd be here like me, all alone. Hopefully tonight we'll hear something. Maybe we'll smell something. Maybe we'll get something come to the window like they do, and they smell our scent. Because that's bush, being in bush. Same thing I do. But since then I've seen them. I've called them Scout. Till I saw him face to face one afternoon right here, leaning against that log. I saw him eyeball to eyeball. Now I call him Elvis, because his hair is all slicked back like Elvis in the 70s. So hopefully I will get that Diane Fossey, Jane Goodall interaction going here. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. And I want them to understand that there's always been a tie between the Kwakwaka'wakw people and my mother's side, the Cree, and every indigenous tribe in the Americas. With Sasquatch Island, it's all about respect. We always respect the Junakwa, the Sasquatch. When it tells you not to be here, you turn and walk away. Tree knocks, throwing things, shaking trees, pushing dead trees at you, that stink smell. Get out of there. I know darn well Scout's watching us, Elvis. And who knows what else is watching us from their clan, the other tribe.